Hello and welcome back to another episode of Intentwise Connect. I am your host, Srinath Reddy. I'm one of the founders and CEO of Intentwise. And what we try to do on this podcast is get experts, as guests and dig deep into all things related to marketplace, advertising, data, and analytics. Today, I have the pleasure of hosting Dakota Morse. He is the founder of Alt Group, which is a top Amazon-focused agency, but he has a super interesting background. We'll dig into that. And he and I will dig into the topic of how to leverage external traffic to spin up the Amazon flywheel. Dakota, great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad to, hopefully learn some from you, and maybe also spread some knowledge to the Amazon community.
Let's do that. What was interesting to me about your background, Dakota, is you have this unique combination where you have spent some time at Amazon in the Amazon ads team. You also have launched a brand, an 8-figure brand on Amazon, and you also run your agency. That's a super interesting combination of background and experience. Why don't you take a moment, just string us through that experience so the audience knows, where you're coming from.
Yeah, totally. So I went to UMass Amherst, which is a state school in Mass. I did really bad in high school, and then I just got really lucky to honestly get a job at Amazon at the time. The advertising division only had about 50 people in it in the US. And then I was this big-eyed college kid, who had no idea what he was doing. But since there were so few people, I was immediately on calls with CEOs, of billion-dollar companies, just because there was really not enough people. It wasn't like Facebook or Google, which obviously at the time had thousands of employees. The Amazon advertising concept was still fairly new. Actually, on my first client meeting, I was only 20 years old and I actually couldn't even drink alcohol, which was kind of funny, So overall, it was a great experience, though. You're thrust into this thing that obviously grew very quickly. I think the advertising business now at Amazon's doing like $16 billion, which is pretty insane, and I think it's largely poised to take over, in the market, with the data that Amazon has. But I had some great opportunities while I was there. I helped launch the China office. Helped launch the 3P seller advertising business. At the time when I joined, it was only focused on 1P mostly. So really got submerged in that. And I ended up seeing a lot of brands, D2C brands, grow rapidly. I'd see brands doing like $15,000 in sales or $10,000 in sales per month jump to doing, $5 million, $10 million in sales per month. And I started to notice these common patterns, of why those brands grew so quickly compared to maybe these legacy brands that grew much slower. And a lot of it came down to content. And when I was at Amazon for 5 years, I got an itch to do something new and decided I want to step out, form my agency, and help more brands grow quickly.
Fantastic background. I think very few people have had that front seat view of seeing their Amazon ad business grow. My expectation is that they were at 31 billion last year, but search and display and all combined, and they had I think pretty good quarter in Q3 with 30% growth or so. My guess is they'll end up at like 40 billion or so in 2022, which is insane. But appreciate you sharing that background. We can dive into today's topic. The phrase Amazon flywheel is used a lot all the time. Why don't you take a moment, just give us your sense for what does Amazon flywheel mean to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the flywheel means something different to everyone, which is, I think, kind of funny. A lot of times on Google, you can pinpoint these exact data points that essentially drive more traffic to your website, help you increase, your frequency in SEO, writing good content. But Amazon's, ambiguous flywheel, and the A9 algorithm are kind of vague. And obviously there's clear inputs, obviously your product has to be good, and you obviously have to make sure that your client satisfaction is high, but how do you actually increase, your rank and make sure you're getting closer and closer to number one for relevant keywords? obviously advertising's super important. Obviously that's where Intentwise comes in. I think making sure that you're actually indexing for the right keywords is critical, and you have those right keywords, one, on your detail page, but two, as part of your advertising strategy. But the other piece of it really comes down, in my opinion, to external traffic, because really there's two main pieces, right? Like there's the traffic you're driving into your page, and then there's the actual page itself. And when you're driving in that traffic, there's obviously Amazon's PPC platform, or DSP, which has become fairly competitive, but still obviously is a very, very strong lever to pull, for new brands and existing brands. But a lot of people are still not considering external traffic. And I think a piece that I really wanted to focus on when I launched my agency was having seen those D2C brands that grew so quickly from $10,000 a month all the way up to $7-10 million a month. I saw them pulling the external traffic and focusing on an omni-channel strategy, a lot more specifically than just really trying kind of a race and fighting for like very competitive keywords on Amazon. One example is I worked with a very prominent art supply company while I was at Amazon, and they really just came into the market doing $15,000 a month. And then, after 2 years, they started crushing Crayola and Faber-Castell, who were like these legacy brands. Those legacy brands were just using Amazon advertising, not super effectively, to be honest, but they were just focusing on trying to win keywords on Amazon. Really, we're not using any tools, obviously they should have been. But where this brand really differentiated themselves was using TikTok and Instagram, with affiliates, with influencers, to make sure that their story, their mission, what they stood for, and how, they were different from these legacy brands really stood out. So I think that's the biggest contributing, or one of the biggest contributing factors to the flywheel right now, is Amazon wants to see this highly qualified external traffic that you're essentially pushing in. You've seen them roll out programs like Amazon attribution, and all these things that don't clearly like add up exactly to, how that's going to help your pages, but just their effort in these areas, I think, designates that, you can grow with driving that outside traffic. And we have seen that with our own brand that we have in-house within our agency, and we also focus that on that lever highly for our partners, and, see the numbers adding up to success.
External traffic, right? So, and by the way, I want to dig into Amazon attribution in a little bit in the conversation. Obviously, TikTok and Instagram, we hear about those a lot. But what are all those channels that are great for sourcing external traffic?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the more you think about how, so inside Alt Group, we have several of our own brands. One of our top brands is in the emergency food preparedness category, which is an interesting niche, and obviously saw pretty explosive growth during, the pandemic. We were obviously positioned well for that, but we could have launched a brand, on Amazon like any other brand, but the lever we really wanted to pull was rich content, because now what you're seeing is, especially a younger demographic, people that are anywhere from, where our target market is like 20 to like 35, is pretty much exclusively spending time on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, right? Like most of the shoppers go to Amazon and they're on Amazon for like 2 minutes, right? Amazon's created this like hyper efficient shopping experience, and like fighting for that like 2 minutes of, or 30 seconds of mind share on Amazon is like very difficult. And Amazon's definitely getting better at, creating programs like Amazon Live, and they're trying to make video content richer on Amazon because they want to increase, that dwell time that people are actually on the platform. But what about like that other 90% of time, or 95 or 99.9% of time, that people are not on Amazon? Think about, I'm sure you go on like TikTok and things, and you're checking, or, obviously like we all know that dwell time is increasing, so we just focused on making really rich content that educated our customers. And we really focused on our core channels being TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And we've seen, just explosive growth through the virality of those platforms. Specifically video content, though, like statics now are just not, really working anymore.
And at the risk of revealing my age, I'm going to say I don't hang out as much on TikTok or Instagram. My kids do. It's interesting. So TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, obviously Google owns YouTube and Meta is behind Instagram. Do you also see opportunities from Google search and Facebook or Meta as sources of traffic? Or, what you've seen so far, is it primarily these three channels? Of course, there's something common about these huge channels, which is they are just much better platforms for creative expression. And maybe that is the common theme here. But, any thoughts and in terms of what you're seeing from the native platforms like Google and Meta?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's interesting because a lot of traditional companies just think about like quote unquote paid media spend. And then there's this huge bucket of what we now call like organic media spend, which I think is like, you're starting to see these companies pop up that focus on what's called like UGC media, user generated content. And it's historically not been a big focus for these like legacy brands. A lot of them focus on like, there'll be a team of like brand dollars, and then there'll be a team that has like channel dollars. And then it's like, to me, that's like an way outdated model.
And they don't necessarily talk to each other.
No, they never talk to each other. And then fighting, for those brand dollars, that team has their own goals, and then this team has their goals. But like the goals need to be in unison ultimately, because that's really what drives the business forward, especially when it's becoming more and more honestly competitive to like actually capture that mind share of customers. And I'm sure I'm speaking for your kids a little bit, or you or everyone, but no one wants to see this, like artificial content anymore, and I think like a lot of people look at, like, going back to your question, like the paid media on Facebook or the paid media on Google, you used to be able to show like a banner ad, and that was compelling to like a certain generation, but no longer is that the case. You're really needing to have this like rich media content on Facebook, on Google, and YouTube, where it's like, again, that user generated content is working super well for us. It's an influencer saying like, this is why I love the product, this is how it helped me, and really focusing, on the benefits and the differentiations that brand has. And like with that, we're both doing organics. We're quote unquote organic, where we're paying those influencers to actually like create that content, post it on their channel so it reaches their follower base. And then we're taking that content, they'll send it to us afterwards, and then we'll edit it into like highly compelling video ads. And then we'll distribute that content, across those platforms, through paid advertising. And then obviously, like, to tie it all together, it's important not just to spray and pray, send all that content out there, but to obviously like understand, how that content, is growing the brand, and that's where I think a lot of these legacy companies will find this strategy interesting, is like actually measuring that increase over time, which, we've definitely seen.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's a super interesting call out here that I'd like to reiterate just for the audience. You frame the term as organic media spend versus paid media spend. And a lot of the external traffic reference you're making is around generating rich media, and you bucket that under organic media. And the other key point is the strategy needs to be in unison between the two. And even in the use case that you just called out, which is there's this continuous spectrum of get great content created, leverage that great content, and get that created kind of organically, but also leverage that content in your paid advertising strategy. So it's not siloed set of tactics that are actually fairly tightly integrated. As I think about you, as I hear you speak about these new creative forms of content creation, is this only applicable to consumer-centric brands? Like, what if I'm an industrial supply, right? Like, or some one of these categories that are, let's just say, not end consumer-centric per se. Does this still apply?
Yeah, I think in many ways, actually, it applies almost more to those categories, just because in many cases, those brands can be less relatable, in many cases than like direct to consumer products. And in many cases, the the content that historically has existed to kind of spread the information about those services or whatever it might be, more like B2B focused products, has been kind of artificial and stale. A lot of it's like these like old existing relationships. And what's interesting is like you can actually use these concepts in these like less competitive categories where like historically like UGC content has not been used, you know, this organic media spend has not been used, and really face almost like no competition, you know. And I think that's where it gets really interesting, is that you can like say, for example, in like my category of emergency preparedness, you know, I'm fighting against, you know, I'd say like 10 other guys that have kind of, you know, figured out this strategy to a degree. We're definitely the best at it, no question. Like we're definitely like much, much better, but they're fighting, you know, in some cases for the same influencers, you know, for the same kind of content creators. And then in these other categories though, which are sometimes untapped, you can actually really just crush it and, you know, get to the top of Google search, you know, or get to the top of Amazon search for certain categories much more quickly. That's actually a strategy that a lot of Amazon sellers are taking right now, is they look for these categories, you know, that have historically like not been innovated upon, you know, or like there is kind of this like lack of, you know, that like D2C rocket ship company, you know, like targeting something like traffic safety or like bathroom cleaning supplies, you know, or something like that. You can create content in those categories, which are historically seen as not sexy, you know, and then be that like rapidly growing player, you know, that captures like 7-8 figures, you know, in your Amazon business hyper quickly. The last thing I'll touch on there is there's obviously this like organic media spend, and then there's this paid media spend, which we talked about, but there's also like SEO strategy for your website, which I think is really important. This also kind of ties a loop of you actually, with the UGC content you're publishing, you know, obviously like how your product's better, how it's differentiated. With your SEO content, you're focused more on answering like the big questions in your category, you know. So for us, for example, with emergency preparedness, you know, we'll say like, we'll write a blog post that says, how many, you know, calories of food do I need to have, you know, to survive a year, or something like that, you know, which is an important thing that people are typing in, and it's something that they want to know. And if you're writing that consistent content, you're actually getting traffic from Google. You know, they start to send traffic, they web crawl you, they see that you have this good content. If you have the good content on your site, and then it's obviously an e-commerce site, people are going to stick there and say, oh, this was a great article, you know, that talks about this problem that I have, you know, and then they'll actually say like, oh, these guys sell solutions, you know, that solve this problem, you know, and it helps build that like brand credibility, right? I'd say that's even more interesting and important, you know, in these like B2B categories, you know, or these like unsexy categories, because again, I'm competing for SEO traffic on Google. Whereas in a lot of categories, you know, you can create articles that answer like the important questions, get crawled by Google, you know, and index to like top 5, you know, honestly, within like a month or two, which I think is crazy.
One of the interesting questions that I've seen clients pose in the past is external traffic. Do you send it to your own D2C site? Do you send it to Amazon? How should brands think about that choice, right? What makes sense when? Obviously, D2C is where they would be sending their traffic today, but you know, make that case for, you know, perhaps a sliver of that should go to their listings on Amazon.
So there's a couple ways to think about that, and we've done a number of tests to kind of analyze how we go about that. One, I think it's most valuable typically to drive traffic to your D2C site to start, you know, because you need to understand like which sources are driving the most qualified traffic that's most likely to convert. I think conversion rate of the traffic is super important, because you don't want to be driving like bad traffic to your site. But on your site, you know, it doesn't really matter if this traffic converts at, you know, 0.01%, you know, or converts at 10%, you know, there's no real impact, you know, to your site at the end of the day. It's just, you might be wasting some money on, you know, inefficient sources. Whereas on Amazon, if you're driving, and this is, again, no one knows exactly how the flywheel works, but if you're driving unqualified traffic to your detail page and your conversion rate starts to go down of that detail page, your unit session percentage is going to start to go down. And conversion rate of detail pages is one of the top metrics that Amazon looks at in order to decide, which listings it shows at the top of search results, right? So Amazon's always incentivized, at the end of the day to show the customer, the 1, 2, or 3 top products that they're most likely to buy. They don't want to show them some piece of junk product, right? Because Amazon wants to make as much money as possible, and if it's showing bad products, people return them, and ultimately, it won't help them make more money. So with driving traffic to your site, obviously, like, customers are going to be able to kind of interpret and see what's going on, but a lot of customers ultimately, will see the products on your site and still decide to buy on Amazon, which I think is like another thing that people don't really weigh. We work with a number of like grocery brands, and we work at a number of startup grocery brands as well, electronics, home goods. We also work with a few service companies and also one software provider. And with all of those companies, honestly, like I'd say about half the companies we work with don't actually sell like solutions or products on their site, funny enough, but they do have, something they provide on Amazon, whether it be through Amazon Fresh, or whatever. And it's just so important though, sometimes to educate that consumer on your site, because you can tell a very like deep story on your site. You can have a great video on the landing page, whatever it might be. And if that customer is compelled enough to like understand your brand, understand your product and your solution, from what you've shown on the site, they'll then jump over to Amazon. And again, I think that's where Amazon attribution kind of stems from, is that Amazon's oftentimes seeing that this traffic that's coming from like a highly well-built site is often converting better on their platform. And they kind of want to tie together, what that customer journey looks like, understanding that, if a brand is willing to invest in that customer being educated and then drive them to Amazon, there should be some type of, interpretation of that and hopefully an increase in that.
Super interesting framing here. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the strategy that you're recommending here is use your D2C site to figure out what external traffic converts the best. Because bringing in traffic that doesn't convert, certainly on the on-site experience standpoint, like there's not as much as a negative, but don't send low converting traffic to your Amazon pages. So figure that out and then find those sources that are best for conversion rates and then send those to Amazon. Is that short, like a very high level summary?
Yeah, that's a succinct way of saying it for sure. I would just say one other thing is there's a lot of affiliate tools now that you can build out for your like Shopify site or whatever it might be, if you're an Amazon brand or an e-commerce brand. And why I love those tools is oftentimes you can incentivize affiliates. Affiliates are people who essentially write like blog articles, and a lot of them will be like, say you're like a air purifier brand, there'll be a person that, writes a website that's like top10airpurifiers.com, and a lot of times you'll look up like, most of the Amazon customer journeys are like, okay, this product's like over $100. The first thing they're going to do is jump to Google and type in like best whatever, right? And I'm guilty of it. I always go to YouTube before I pretty much buy anything over $100. And you can index, within those sites. And if you have an affiliate program built out, they click on that link. And a lot of them are going to drive those affiliate links directly to Amazon.
Yeah.
So they're going to be part of like the Amazon affiliates program. But the thing is, the Amazon affiliates program pays out a very low percentage of commission. They typically are only paying out like below 3%. I think a lot of categories now are only like 1%. But again, the volume on Amazon for these affiliates is high, so they're a lot of times, willing to, accept that 1% because it's 1% of a big pie. Whereas you can reach out to these affiliates, owning your own Shopify site and say, hey, if you drive the traffic to my site, instead of driving it to Amazon, I'll pay you 8%, 10%, right? It's a no-brainer because on Amazon, the average A cost that I pay for a lot of my products is like 20, 25%, if you have that margin. Some brands are paying 40, 50% A costs. I know obviously some people, your customers might be paying 5% with the efficiency you guys drive, but the thing is at the end of the day, like, it's just important to understand that like, okay, I can pay 8% instead of paying 20% on Amazon for certain things, I can educate that customer on my site. And then when they make it to Amazon, they're going to type in exactly what they want, and I won't then need to pay, for like that sponsored click, So I think that's just, and then again, your conversion rate is staying high on Amazon, and that helps spin the flywheel, a whole lot faster.
Makes sense. You talked about ACOS. I heard you say unit session percent. So let's talk about metrics and tracking. So, obviously with external traffic, there will always be tracking challenges. You also mentioned Amazon attribution, which is something Amazon introduced a little while back to help with tracking external traffic. Talk to me about your measurement stack today. And I know it's a universe that can't be perfect just because of just the nature of it. But walk me through, how are you measuring things in terms of tools you use to try to stitch these together? Or maybe you're not. And also, what metrics are you looking at? Just walk us through that.
Yeah, I think there's a big opportunity in the market for, an improved product here, and I'm obviously really excited to see what you guys are going to do, with the analytics program that you're building out right now. Because I know that you guys are obviously looking to kind of connect that. But I think what we're doing today that's working for us and working for our clients is one, with our Shopify site, Shopify brings forward a lot of metrics, about where traffic's coming from, which traffic is converting the best, whether that be like social, organic. And then since they've kind of created this app ecosystem, they have access, to how many sales like the different apps are driving. So if you're using, Klaviyo for emails, or Attentive for SMS, those tools will have their, essentially like plugins to Shopify, and they'll be able to say how many sales they're driving. Obviously the attribution sometimes can be duplicative, I believe, and no one's really like answered that question exactly of saying like Klaviyo's like, we got this sale, and then,
so last click,
Facebook could say they got that sale, and like, who really knows at the end of the day, like who's driving what sales? But again, I always believe like, as long as the metrics are going in the right direction, that's what's most important. Google Analytics is obviously like a critical tool, and everyone should obviously have like Google Analytics, installed and make sure that they understand like where the traffic's coming from. Google Tag Manager is super important, to understand like which parts of your site are like actually getting the clicks, and like which apps are like triggering those clicks. Typically you got to have like a developer set that up, but it's really worth it once you have it going. We're using tools like oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so that's like, these are all kind of focused on the D2C side of things. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm also curious about tracking on Amazon for external traffic. Curious to see what you're doing around that, especially with Amazon attribution.
So we are not doing a ton right now, honestly, for how we track on Amazon. What we're doing in most cases is giving influencers or affiliates like an Amazon code. So you can generate like a coupon code in Seller Central.
I see.
And then you can obviously give them that code. And then when they actually do those posts, start to, see how often that coupon code is being redeemed. And then a lot of them will include that coupon code, on their site. And then you can obviously see those redemptions, but it's definitely not as robust, today as we're doing on Shopify. I know there's a lot of people in the market now trying to build out, like affiliate stacks that sit between, like the brand and Amazon, and they act as like an intermediary to try to interpret that traffic. And I think that's like an incredibly hot space, because again, if you can pay 10% to an affiliate versus paying Amazon 25% of that sale, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. What's interesting to me about this conversation, Dakota, is just overall emphasis on content, creative content, especially if you want to play in channels like TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And what that aligns with also is a theme I saw at Unboxed, which was Amazon's conference earlier this, last month in New York, where they're putting so much emphasis on making creative resources available to advertisers and brands through their platform. So great alignment there. I'm curious, what is the implication on the brand teams, right? What skills should they think about building and developing? Of course, they should, probably work with agencies like yours, But if I'm in charge of an e-com team inside a brand, what skills should I think about adding that is different from the past?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, again, going back to a little bit of the two main levers of Amazon, right, are driving traffic, paid traffic or organic traffic, depending, and then, the actual like conversion rate of the detail page. And most brands will just say like, okay, I'm spending 50,000. I want to spend 100,000, or I want to spend 200,000, or the spend is not working. So I need to drop all of our spend, or our spend is capped at 100K. Like we should jump into DSP, right away. And like so many brands only think in this bucket, which I think is incredibly important. And obviously I think for a lot of brands, they're underspending, in terms of what they could be. And the reason I say that is because they haven't focused on what that customer experience is on Amazon. If you really think about it, most of the customers are looking at 5 images of your product, and that's what they're using to make, their buying decision, right? But how come so few brands actually think about changing those 5 images in order to increase the conversion rate of their products, right? How come so few brands think about, oh, if this video is maybe not quite explaining our product well enough, or it could be a little bit more compelling, or we could build out better A+ content, for people that, scroll down. And we actually saw that at Amazon. Obviously they have internal tools, but we saw heat maps, of how customers like dwell the detail pages, and there's actually a statistic, and I believe it's public, but basically that 70% of people, are not like scrolling down, on Amazon. If you look at the heat map, it's something like the top half of the screen. The like IMAP is just on the images. No one's reading the bullet points. I can't remember the last time I read bullet points. Obviously it's important for SEO, but if you're not telling that complete story, in those 5 images, you're losing, 70% of the customers, because they're going to go to another product page that they feel like solves their problem better than yours is, and then you get those 30% of people that are scrolling down, like the A+ content. Now you have A+ premium content, and Amazon's really focusing on this video piece.
Video,
now.
yes.
You're seeing video more than ever, which I love, obviously a video agency. But the video video, there's a statistic basically about, I think it's like 80% of customers would rather watch a video about a product than read about the product, right? And there's always the thing like a picture's, worth, 1,000 words. So then like a video would be worth 1,000,000,000,000 words, whatever it might be, because the video is a bunch of pictures. So I think internally these brand teams need to be focusing on how can they increase like the content on those pages, make sure they're as compelling as possible, so that conversion rate, even if it goes up 2%, think about if you're a brand that's doing, $10 million, $100 million on Amazon, like a lot of these bigger companies are. Why wouldn't you look to grow that conversion rate by 1, 2, 3%? And then that paid traffic is not going to drop in efficiency. It's only going to go up in efficiency. It's going to open up those next level of brackets for your spend.
Investment in content is always, I think, tricky business inside brands. And frankly, this is a question we faced a lot when I was working at my previous role, which is how much do you invest in content? How do you justify it? And I always found, Dakota, that like the more measurement and testing abilities become available, the easier it becomes, right? So being able to, let's say, A/B test video A versus video B, and then proving the difference in conversion rates, that'll make, I think, the budget allocation decisions a whole lot simpler. But I think your point here is like going forward with the emphasis that's put on, for example, video by Amazon, the emphasis on quality content creation, it has always been important, but it'll get increasingly more important, right? I think that's kind of the key point here. Go ahead.
I was going to say one other piece was that you're seeing, like, to your point about testing, you're seeing Amazon do all these tests now with video content, and like I've seen recently where you're on the mobile app, or even I think I saw it on desktop the other day, but you do a search like for supplements, vitamin C, and Amazon will show the image, and then like immediately it changes into the video on the detail page. And as you scroll, it starts to autoplay these videos. You're seeing sponsored brand video pop up in more placements than ever. I've seen sponsored brand video pop up on detail pages, now, for competing brands. So Amazon's clearly doing all of these tests to try to increase their own conversion rate, which I think is really interesting, and like, I always like to take the mindset of like, I'm just going to copy what Amazon does, because like, obviously if they're doing this, it's important. Like they're smarter than anyone out there about like how to increase the conversion rate of their own, product, so I just always try to follow that. One of my other things that we always do is we look at how they set up the detail pages, on their Alexa products, and how they set up the detail pages on like the Ring products, because who do you think is actually going in and like measuring those? The smartest people, right? So they're going to like always have the best practices. So like, why wouldn't I just copy that? Right. And then we've definitely seen, the effectiveness of that.
That's a great point, a great tip actually. So go check out the detail pages of Alexa and Ring, and
Amazon Basics is another one. Like,
just leverage those.
Obviously good price, but like they're doing the best practices. They're going to have data that we're not going to have access to. Obviously, we are doing a lot of A/B testing though with experiments now, which I love, because we'll do an experiment, for example, where like we'll show our product, just the product, and then we'll do the B, which is the our product, but we'll explode it out, so it'll show like every single thing that's like included in the product, and over time we found that the exploded view where you see all the value and every little piece is what's working better, right? And hypothetically, and then once we take that, okay, what if we put these pieces here, and these pieces over here in the next experiment? We might not see a huge increase, but even if I see a 0.25% increase in that hero image, having like a better conversion rate, why wouldn't I just keep trying those experiments? It literally costs my graphic designer maybe like 15 minutes to make that change, for a 0.25% increase in conversion rate, which at the end of the year, could be another $100,000. For these bigger brands, that could be millions of dollars to just literally move this thing over here so that more customers click on it versus clicking on, a competitor's product.
Absolutely. What did we miss, Dakota? Any parting advice for the audience when it comes to external traffic?
I'd say the last thing, honestly, is like just always testing and learning, I think, is the biggest thing. I think we got connected because I'm always trying to look for new solutions, in the market to like kind of tie this piece together, looking for better data, looking for better advertising options. I think a lot of people get very comfortable on Amazon or Shopify or whatever it might be. But as soon as you get comfortable, the brand over here is going to figure out a little like angle to like what you're doing, and they're going to start to surpass you. We're seeing more Chinese sellers on Amazon, and I support Chinese sellers because I think there should be, like affordable offerings for products, but I also don't support them sometimes because, they undercut and sometimes, don't always portray their products, in a fully accurate light. But I think it's important to always think about how you're going to stand ahead and continue to elevate your brand, because I believe that having a brand and something that customers can trust is still kind of one of the last frontiers, of how we can continue to grow on Amazon. And that factor of experimentation, comes down to saying like, yeah, this thing might result in nothing, or testing this new ad platform might result in nothing, but if it's a risk, that could potentially pay off into having value, I think it's always worth testing. That's where we kind of came into the market with the content idea, and we launched the content idea, doing the outbound, reaching out to the influencers and that whole strategy, tried it out. We saw people doing it. We thought it would work, tested it for our brand, built our brand to 8 figures, in under a year, so clearly it did work, and now we're helping more brands do the same thing. So I think it always comes down to testing, trying. We're getting really deep into TikTok now, which I think is kind of this next massive channel. We're figuring out a lot of the best practices there. And, we're also looking at a few other apps now in terms of, where the next traffic might be coming from, and always trying to stay on that frontier.
Fantastic. Well, this has been super insightful and really, I learned a lot. Especially through some of your kind of hands-on specific use cases. Dakota, thank you so much for your time. For anyone in the audience that wants to learn more about external traffic, creative content, please feel free to reach out to Dakota Morse at Alt Group. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome.